Welcome to the third video about ongoing CDD and Austrac's Customer Due Diligence Essentials series, also known as CDD Essentials. This series explores one of the key components of Australia's anti-money laundering and counterterrorism financing regime, understanding who your customers are. The information presented in this video is current at the time of recording, is general in nature, and does not constitute legal advice. You may consider obtaining your own independent professional advice, which can take into account your business-specific and individual needs. We recommend that you consider this video's content alongside the detailed guidance available on the Austrac website. Throughout this recording, we'll pause for short reflection questions to test your understanding. Please have a way to record your responses as you go. There are 4 videos in the CDD Essentials series. Video 1 is a CDD overview where we provide a concise look at the CDD cycle, explore customer risk ratings, and define essential terminology. Video 2 explores initial CDD and simplified CDD, including when and how each applies. We also touch on delayed initial CDD, pre-commencement customers, and reliance on third parties. Video 3, this video, examines ongoing CDD, explaining how to identify, assess, manage, and mitigate a customer's money laundering, terrorism financing, and proliferation financing risk over the course of the business relationship. Video 4 looks at enhanced CDD, including what it is, why it matters, and when to apply it. Enhanced CDD involves taking additional steps to identify your customer and to identify, assess, manage, and mitigate their high MLTF risk. Let's move on to learning outcomes. By the end of this video, you'll be able to understand the purpose and importance of ongoing CDD over the course of the business relationship. You'll then be able to identify what you must monitor for, including unusual transactions, behaviors that may give rise to certain reporting obligations, and changes in customer MLTF risk. You'll then be able to apply practical methods for monitoring customers and their use of your designated services. And finally, you'll be able to respond appropriately to unusual transactions and behaviors. Before we look more closely at ongoing CDD, let's take a moment to review the overall CDD process. Customer due diligence involves understanding who your customers are before you start providing them with designated services and throughout the course of a business relationship. CDD starts with identifying your customer and relevant parties, then assessing their MLTF risk before providing a designated service. The customer's level of risk determines whether simplified, ordinary, or enhanced CDD is required. Now, as you continue providing services, you must conduct ongoing CDD by monitoring for unusual activity that may require a suspicious matter report or SMR. For ongoing relationships, you also need to review and, when necessary, update and re-verify Know Your Customer or KYC information and the customer's MLTF risk. If higher risk emerges, enhanced CDD is triggered, and if risk is low, simplified measures may apply. Together, these steps help you identify, assess, manage, and mitigate MLTF risk throughout the customer relationship. And now that we've seen how the different elements of customer due diligence fit together, let's take a closer look at ongoing CDD. Ongoing CDD involves monitoring and managing MLTF risk throughout the customer relationship. And this includes all of the following: monitoring transactions and behaviors for suspicious activity, updating customers' MLTF risk profile in response to various triggers, and reviewing, updating, and re-verifying information as needed. Once you've completed initial customer due diligence and started providing designated services, your AML-CTF obligations don't stop. Ongoing customer due diligence is about ongoing monitoring to continue to understand your customer, how they use your designated services, and whether their risk changes over time. Ongoing CDD is important because risks don't only exist at onboarding. Customer circumstances or behaviors can change. Criminals may also try to exploit a business after a relationship is established. You must monitor your customers so you can identify, assess, manage, and mitigate MLTF risk when providing services. And this includes monitoring for unusual transactions or behaviors that may trigger an obligation to submit an SMR. Ongoing CDD isn't a one-size-fits-all process. The way you monitor your customers must be appropriate to your business's MLTF risk. Your monitoring of customers is informed by your identification of their MLTF risk in initial CDD, as well as any changes to their MLTF risk throughout the customer relationship. Your AML-CTF policies must document how you will monitor your customers, including any systems, controls, and procedures. Your AML-CTF policies must outline when and how you will review and re-verify KYC information, and review and update your assessment of their MLTF risk. Your AML-CTF policies must set out how you'll respond to unusual transactions and behaviors, or additional MLTF risk you identify. Your AML-CTF policies also need to explain when independent evaluations of your AML-CTF program need to occur. And you must also keep records that show how you've met your ongoing CDD obligations, including records of the customer's transactions, how customer risk was identified, analyzed, and assessed, and any decisions made about how you conduct ongoing CDD on the customer. By maintaining strong ongoing CDD processes, you can detect changes in customer risk and make sure your business continues to manage MLTF risk over time. So before we look more closely at what you must monitor and how to respond to unusual transactions and behaviors, let's quickly touch on how ongoing CDD can look different for customers with different MLTF risk levels. A risk-based approach means you don't treat every customer the same. Instead, you will tailor your monitoring of that customer to their specific MLTF risk. For example, customers with higher MLTF risk will likely require more intensive, ongoing monitoring through enhanced CDD, whereas certain low-risk customers could be monitored through a simplified CDD approach. Some customers will present high MLTF risk, such as if they're a foreign politically exposed person or have ties to a high-risk jurisdiction. When conducting ongoing CDD, you may identify that a customer's MLTF risk has become high due to a change in their behavior or circumstances. Now, it's at this stage you would need to apply enhanced CDD. Enhanced CDD involves taking extra steps to understand the customer, clarify the nature of the risk, and decide whether your existing controls are sufficient to mitigate and manage the higher risks. You will learn more about enhanced CDD requirements in the fourth video in this series. Regularly updating a customer's KYC information and checking that it continues to reflect their current circumstances is also essential. Any other measures you take as part of ongoing CDD must be in line with your specific business's MLTF risk, as outlined in your AML-CTF program. Then we have medium risk customers. These customers may have some features that increase their risk from low risk, but may not require enhanced CDD. For these customers, ongoing CDD may involve routine monitoring to make sure their behavior remains consistent with what you know about them, updating their KYC information when needed, and responding if something changes in a way that affects their risk. Any other measures you put in place as part of ongoing CDD must be in line with your specific business's risk as outlined in your AML-CTF program. You'll also get some customers who may have low MLTF risk. In these situations, simplified CDD measures may be appropriate to use for ongoing CDD. Simplified CDD may be applied when the customer's MLTF risk is low, enhanced CDD is not required, and your AML-CTF policies specify how simplified CDD measures will be applied. When simplified CDD has been applied, you still need to meet your ongoing CDD obligations. However, you might be satisfied that you can do this with less intensive monitoring or by updating their KYC information less frequently, provided that the customer's behavior remains consistent with what you know about them. Any change in a customer's circumstances or behavior requires reassessment of their MLTF risk. And this obligation applies to customers at all risk levels, with monitoring and controls adjusted to reflect the revised level of risk. Okay, let's apply what we've just covered with a few short scenarios. In our first scenario, a customer is an individual Australian resident with no high-risk indicators. Think about the likely level of MLTF risk they pose. What ongoing CDD measures might be appropriate based on your assessment of this customer's risk. Now, you might like to pause the video as you record your response. There isn't a single correct answer to this question. What matters is applying a risk-based approach informed by what you know about the customer and how they use your designated services. For customers assessed as lower risk, there are a range of ongoing CDD measures that may be applied. And these can include monitoring transactions and behavior to confirm they remain consistent with what you know about the customer, carrying out periodic checks to ensure their activity and use of your services still align with the low risk profile, and updating KYC information when you become aware of changes in circumstances. Where risk remains low, it may also be appropriate to apply less intensive or less frequent monitoring, provided there are no indicators that suggest the customer's risk has increased. These are examples only, and they're not intended to be prescriptive or exhaustive. The appropriate combination and intensity of ongoing CDD measures should always be informed by your assessment of your customer's MLTF risk and what you observe over time. In our second activity, a customer is a non-individual with a multi-layered ownership structure, regularly transacting through a high-risk country. Think about the likely level of MLTF risk they pose. What ongoing CDD measures might be appropriate based on your assessment of this customer's risk? Again, pause if you need time to think and write down your response. As with the previous activity, there isn't a single correct answer. The focus here is on applying a risk-based approach, taking into account what you know about the customer, how their ownership and control is structured, and how they use your designated services. For customers assessed as higher risk, ongoing CDD will usually involve a more proactive approach. And this can include keeping a closer eye on transactions and behavior, particularly where activity involves higher risk jurisdictions, and taking a deeper look at transaction patterns to identify anything unusual or unexpected. It may also involve reviewing and updating customer information more regularly, paying closer attention to ownership and control arrangements, checking that transactions make sense in light of the customer's stated business purpose, and making further inquiries where behavior or circumstances change. Again, these are examples only. They're not intended to be prescriptive or exhaustive. The appropriate combination and intensity of ongoing CDD measures should always be informed by your assessment of the customer's MLTF risk and what you observe over time. Now that we've had a look at all stages of the risk spectrum, what about customers who are already on your books before the new laws come into effect? You might have existing customers already using your services when the reforms begin. For these pre-commencement customers, you have an obligation to monitor for unusual transactions and behaviors that may give rise to an SMR obligation. You must also review and update their KYC information at an appropriate frequency, and if you have doubts about its adequacy or veracity. In addition to this, you must also monitor for significant changes in the nature and purpose of the business relationship, which results in the customer's MLTF risk being medium or high. If there are significant changes in the nature and purpose of the business relationship that increases the customer's risk to medium or high, or an SMR obligation arises in relation to the customer, you must complete initial CDD. Finally, let's touch on one last scenario: nested service relationships. There are additional requirements if you provide services as part of what's known as a nested service relationship. And this is where someone uses your services through another reporting entity in another country, such as a partner platform or system. In this situation, you must review and update the customer's MLTF risk at least once every 2 years, or sooner if something changes that affects their risk. You must also review and, where appropriate, update and re-verify the customer's KYC information at least once every 2 years, or sooner if something changes, or if they start providing a designated service as part of a nested service relationship when they had not previously done so. For more information on ongoing CDD obligations for nested service relationships, please refer to the published guidance on the OSTRAC website. To build an effective customer monitoring process, it's important to understand what you should be looking for during ongoing CDD. In the next few slides, we'll explore 4 key areas. First, unusual transactions that may trigger an SMR obligation. Second, unusual behaviors that may trigger an SMR obligation. Third, information that may relate to certain criminal offenses. And finally, we'll look at how sector-specific indicators can help you recognize suspicious activity that's more common in your industry. What is unusual will depend on the customer's profile and expected activity, nature of your business, designated services and sector, and circumstances in which the activity occurs. A key part of monitoring is identifying transactions that are inconsistent with what you know about the customer. A transaction becomes unusual when it differs from their normal pattern or doesn't align with the nature and purpose of the customer's relationship with your business, the customer's MLTF risk, or their source of funds and source of wealth where relevant. Unusual transactions can also be large or complex transactions relating to the customer, or transactions that have no apparent economic or lawful purpose. You might notice a sudden increase in the number of value of transactions, especially when there's no clear commercial or lawful reason. Large cash deposits, quick transfers through multiple accounts, or changes in ownership structures that obscure ownership can also stand out. Some customers may also try to structure their activity to avoid reporting thresholds, and this might look like splitting large cash deposits into smaller amounts to stay under a limit. Context matters. What's unusual for one customer might be perfectly normal for another. A legitimate business could experience seasonal peaks in income or rely on cash transactions for valid reasons. However, when something doesn't look right, you should take responsible steps to understand why and decide if further action is needed. We'll go into more detail about responding to unusual activity later in the video. We now have another scenario. Think about your business and customers. What kinds of transactions would you consider unusual? Once more, pause if you need time to think and record your response. Again, there isn't a single correct answer. What's considered unusual will depend on the nature of your business, the designated services you provide, and what you know about your customer and their expected activity. In practice, unusual transactions are often those that don't align with what you would reasonably expect based on a customer's profile or transaction history. And this might include transactions that are significantly larger or more frequent than normal, activity involving higher risk countries or regions, or patterns that appear designed to avoid reporting requirements. You might also consider transactions that don't seem to have a clear commercial or lawful purpose, transactions that involve third parties without an obvious reason, or the use of complex structures in situations where they don't appear necessary. Once more, these are examples only. What matters is that you understand what unusual looks like for your business and customers, and that you're able to identify activity that warrants a closer look. If you'd like to find out more, there is detailed guidance, which includes examples of unusual transaction activity on the OSTRAC website. Monitoring for unusual behaviors can highlight risk which may not be visible in transaction records. Recognizing unusual transactions early helps protect your business and the broader financial system from misuse. However, transactions are only one part of the picture. Sometimes it's a customer's behavior that signals something isn't right. Monitoring customers isn't just about reviewing data. It's also about identifying patterns or changes in how a customer uses your designated services. Unusual behavior can appear in how a customer interacts with you, but it can also emerge in their broader activity over time. And these changes can reveal MLTF risk that won't always show up in a single transaction record or interaction. You might notice a customer becoming evasive or defensive when asked routine questions or giving answers that seem coached or rehearsed. Some customers may try to avoid providing information, insist on dealing with one particular staff member, or appear to be taking instructions from someone else. Other indicators might include frequent changes to the KYC information without a clear reason, attempts to persuade staff not to report a transaction, or unusual interest in how your reporting obligations work. In some cases, customers may try to offer gifts or incentives to staff to speed up a process or to avoid scrutiny. These behaviors can suggest an attempt to hide identity, disguise a source of funds, or prevent staff from asking further questions. When something feels out of character, or inconsistent with the customer's usual behavior, it may be a sign to take a closer look. Again, we ask you to reflect. Think about your business and customers. What kinds of customer behaviors might prompt you to take a closer look? Pause if you need time to record your answer. Again, there isn't a single answer. What matters is understanding what behavior is unusual or unexpected in the context of your business, your customers, and the designated services you provide. In practice, unusual behaviors are often those that don't align with what you would reasonably expect from a customer. And this might include customers becoming evasive or defensive when asked routine questions, providing answers that seem rehearsed or influenced by someone else, or making frequent changes to their customer information without a clear reason. You might also take a closer look when customers are unwilling or unable to explain the purpose of a transaction or business relationship, rely on third parties without an obvious reason, or show unusual interest in transaction limits or reporting obligations. Behaviors that suggest attempts to influence staff or avoid normal processes can also be a sign that something isn't right. Keep in mind that these are examples only, and more information is available on the OSTRAC website. Together, unusual transactions and behaviors give you a clearer picture of whether something may require closer attention. When activity or behavior doesn't align with what you would reasonably expect, it is important to review what you know and decide what steps are appropriate to manage any MLTF risk. You must monitor your customers for indicators that suggest the customer or their agent isn't who they claim to be, or a customer is planning an MLTF or criminal offense using a designated service. You must also monitor for indicators of financial crime, trafficking and crimes against people, and other conduct that may point to unlawful activity. The key is to recognize patterns or information that suggests something may be wrong so you can respond appropriately and meet your reporting obligations. You can find a comprehensive list of the types of criminal activity you need to monitor on our website. In practice, this can show up in different ways. You might see funds being moved in a way that hides their source, transfers through multiple accounts with no clear purpose, or unexplained use of third parties. Some customers may use company or trust structures to hide ownership or suddenly change the way they transact without a clear commercial reason. These patterns can indicate that your services are being used to disguise wealth or distance funds from illegal activity. The types of offenses you must monitor for include money laundering, terrorism financing, proliferation financing, tax evasion, fraud, and bribery. There are also serious crimes against individuals such as human trafficking, child exploitation, drug trafficking, and other forms of organized crime. And this list is not exhaustive. In some cases, financial services are used to move, store, or launder the proceeds of these crimes, even if the criminal activity itself happens somewhere else. Unusual transactions or behaviors can be indicators of these offenses. If you suspect on reasonable grounds that you have information that may be relevant to a crime, you must submit an SMR to OSTRAC within the appropriate timeframes. Specifically, no later than 24 hours after forming the suspicion for matters relating to terrorism financing, or 3 business days for all other matters. The AML-CTF Act, rules, and OSTRAC's website contain more details about these offenses, a list of all offenses you must monitor for, and examples of what they can look like in different sectors. Different industries face different MLTF risk. What looks unusual for one business might be completely normal for another. To help with this, OSTRAC publishes sector-specific indicators of suspicious activity. And these indicators provide real-world examples of sector-specific transactions and behaviors that may be linked to criminal activity that can help you identify unusual transactions and behaviors relevant to your business. For example, real estate businesses may see property purchases funded by third parties who have no clear relationship with the buyer, or settlement payments made in cash without a clear source of funds. Accountants and lawyers may come across clients using complex company or trust structures with no commercial purpose, or requests to move funds with limited documentation. Virtual asset service providers may notice rapid transfers between wallets or quick conversion of assets into privacy-enhancing coins or tokens. These indicators are designed to help you recognize when something doesn't seem right and support your monitoring systems and controls. You are expected to use indicators that are relevant to your business and to use your industry-specific knowledge to monitor for activities you consider suspicious. You must review and update your MLTF risk assessment and update your AML-CTF policies when OSTRAC provides information identifying or assessing MLTF risk in relation to the designated services you provide and in certain other scenarios. More detailed indicators and examples are available on the OSTRAC website. These include the National Risk Assessment on Money Laundering, Terrorism Financing, and Proliferation Financing in Australia. OSTRAC also publishes intelligence products to help businesses understand, identify, and report suspicious financial activity to detect and prevent criminal activities. Together, these resources can support both compliance and frontline staff who interact directly with customers. As we touched on earlier, monitoring your customers is a key part of ongoing CDD. It helps you identify, assess, manage, and mitigate the MLTF risk you may face when providing designated services. We're going to explore the concept further over the next few slides. Monitoring also supports your other AML-CTF obligations, including submitting SMRs, conducting enhanced CDD, and reassessing a customer's risk over time. You must monitor all customers when you provide a designated service. For occasional customers, this means monitoring their transactions and behavior while the service is being provided. If you have an ongoing business relationship with a customer, you must monitor their activity throughout the relationship. And in some situations, you may also need to review and update their KYC information and reassess their MLTF risk if something changes, but we'll speak more on that later. Ongoing monitoring helps you confirm that what you know about the customer remains accurate and that their profile hasn't shifted. Customer monitoring can be automated, manual, or a mix of both. What's appropriate depends on the nature, size, and complexity of your business. Automated monitoring is common for businesses that deal with a high volume of transactions. Automated systems can analyze large amounts of data and detect patterns that may be difficult to identify manually. For example, they can help flag unusually large transactions, unexpected spikes in activity, potential structuring, or transfers involving high-risk jurisdictions or those subject to targeted financial sanctions. Manual monitoring can be effective for smaller businesses or those with lower or infrequent transaction volumes. If you can effectively monitor your customers manually, you might do this by doing all of the following: training staff to recognize unusual activity, reviewing customer transactions on a regular schedule, and comparing behavior to what you know about the customer and how similar customers use your services. Manual monitoring also relies on staff escalating unusual activity to the right person or team for further review in a timely manner. If you can't effectively monitor transactions manually, OSTRAC expects that you have an automated transaction monitoring system. You must monitor your customers in a way that is appropriate to identify, assess, manage, and mitigate the MLTF risk you reasonably face in providing designated services. It is also important for your AML-CTF policies to specify how often your monitoring and review will occur. For example, you might set a daily, weekly, or monthly review cycle, depending on the customer's MLTF risk and the nature of the services you provide. Clear policies help ensure your monitoring is consistent, structured, and appropriate to your business. Again, the method you choose depends on what is right for your business and the MLTF risk you reasonably face. A key part of ongoing CDD is setting up monitoring alerts. These alerts help you recognize what activity needs a closer look and when. Alerts don't replace decision-making, but they highlight transactions or behaviors that need a closer look. These may relate to unusual patterns or changes in customer activity, or they may be triggered because the activity aligns with known MLTF typologies or involves high-risk transactions, parties, or countries. You must regularly check the effectiveness of your ongoing CDD. We expect your AML-CTF policies to include processes to review the effectiveness of your alerts and controls. This includes checking that you have enough customer information to identify unusual activity, that alerts are operating correctly, that your alert scenarios are up to date and comprehensive, and that unusual behavior or transactions are being responded to, handled, and escalated appropriately. If you identify problems, you are expected to address them in a timely manner. Monitoring should also adapt over time. We expect you to update your customer monitoring when new indicators of criminal activity emerge, whether from your own internal intelligence or from information communicated by OSTRAC. If you make significant changes to your customer monitoring, your AML-CTF policies should also be updated to reflect these changes and must be approved by a senior manager. Once updated, your controls should be tested to make sure they work in practice, and all changes should be documented. Identifying unusual transactions or behavior is only the first step. Once something has been flagged, you need to decide how to respond. Your response should be informed by your AML-CTF policies. OSTRAC expects that your AML-CTF policies set out how alerts are reviewed and escalated, and who is responsible for making decisions about ongoing CDD actions. Your policies must also help how you decide whether an SMR is required, including how matters can be escalated or reviewed in a timely way. Without clear processes to review and respond to alerts, it is unlikely that you will be able to demonstrate that you are managing and mitigating MLTF risk. For every unusual transaction or behavior that you identify, we expect you to determine whether there's a reasonable explanation for it. To do this, consider what you reasonably know about the customer, including their MLTF risk, the nature and purpose of the business relationship, and the customer's source of funds or source of wealth. You can compare the activity against their previous transactions, against similar customers, or against what's normal in your industry. If the activity makes sense after you review it, you may decide that no further action is needed. However, if the activity still appears unusual, you may need to update what you know about the customer. And this could involve reviewing, and if appropriate, updating their KYC information or MLTF risk, asking for more detail, or re-verifying information if you have doubts about whether it's adequate or true. If concerns remain, you may need to take further steps. Depending on the circumstances, this could include applying enhanced CDD measures, such as establishing source of funds or source of wealth, submitting an SMR, or limiting or ceasing to provide designated services to the customer. Your AML-CTF policies may require you to refer the matter to a senior manager for their visibility. When you identify significant changes in a customer, such as their ownership, use of your designated services, delivery channels, or a new connection to a high-risk country, you must reassess their MLTF risk rating. Again, whenever you have a customer with high MLTF risk, you must conduct enhanced CDD. This includes when a transaction has no apparent economic or legal purpose, or when it would involve an unusually complex or large transaction, or an unusual pattern of transactions. Again, we'll discuss your enhanced CDD obligations in more detail in the next video. Although enhanced CDD may be required in some situations, our focus here is on how you respond when any transaction or behavior remains unusual after your initial review. The next step is deciding how to escalate and manage that activity. You may also need to escalate how you monitor and manage unusual activity. Internal escalation ensures decisions are consistent, documented, and reviewed at the right level. And as a reminder, you must submit an SMR if you suspect on reasonable grounds that information you have may be relevant to a crime, a customer, potential customer, or their agent isn't who they claim to be, or a person is planning an MLTF offense using a designated service. You must also submit the SMR within the required timeframes. There may be instances while performing ongoing CDD, a business may decide to stop providing a designated service or limit the designated services provided to the customer. Any decision to limit or end services should be guided by your AML-CTF program and your assessment of your customer's MLTF risk, along with your internal escalation and approval processes. Whatever the outcome, you must keep records that show how you've complied with your ongoing CDD obligations for that customer. This includes recording the customer's transactions, your identification and assessment of their MLTF risk, and any decisions your business makes about how you conduct ongoing CDD on the customer. Keeping clear and accurate records supports future reviews of their activity and demonstrates that you are meeting your AML-CTF obligations. To bring this together, let's look at some examples. In our first example, a staff member manually reviews recent customer transactions as part of their regular ongoing CDD checks. During this review, they identify a customer making frequent and high-value cash purchases over a 6-month period. These purchases are just under the cash reporting threshold. The staff member checks the customer's history, reviews their KYC information, and compares their activity with similar customers. The pattern still doesn't make sense, so the matter is escalated to the compliance officer. After reviewing the activity, the compliance officer reads an announcement on the customer's website that their business has expanded to multiple low-risk countries in the past year. They noticed their buying pattern had increased in line with the customer's growth and that the purchases were legitimate. They decide to increase the customer's MLTF risk from low risk to medium risk. They decide that no further actions are required for this review. The business documents the alert, the transaction reviewed, and the steps taken to assess the activity. These records help demonstrate how the business complied with its ongoing CDD obligations. In our second example, a conveyancing office uses an automated monitoring system that flags a customer who has recently lodged several property transfer requests with unusually short turnaround times. The alert also shows a request for settlement funds to be directed to a new account that is not listed in the customer's file. A staff member reviews the alert by checking the customer's KYC information, including their identification documents, beneficial ownership details, and past settlement history. They then contact the customer using a neutral business explanation to confirm the reason for the new activity and the additional account. The customer explains that they have partnered with a new developer and are managing multiple projects at once. Based on the information available to them at the time and what can be reasonably checked, the staff member judges that there are no indicators of heightened MLT at risk and no need to apply enhanced CDD. They update the customer's KYC information to include the new account details and record the change in activity. No further action is required, but the alert, review steps, conversations, and updates are documented to demonstrate compliance with ongoing CDD obligations. From these scenarios, we can see that responding to unusual activity is about more than identifying risk. It's about taking steps to understand what's happening, updating what you know about the customer, and deciding the most appropriate next steps to manage and mitigate MLTF risk. Let's take a moment to recap the key concepts we've covered. Ongoing CDD is required to understand how customers use your services over time and to manage and mitigate their MLTF risk throughout the business relationship. You must monitor for unusual transactions, unusual behaviors, and changes in customer activity, especially anything that doesn't make sense for what you know about the customer or the designated services you provide to them. You must also monitor for indicators that may indicate criminal activity and use sector-specific indicators relevant to your business and the designated services you provide. When unusual activity occurs, you must take appropriate steps to understand and respond to the risk. Depending on the risk posed, this may include applying enhanced CDD. This could involve updating the customer's KYC information, reassessing their MLTF risk, escalating the matter internally, or submitting an SMR when required. Together, these elements form a risk-based approach that helps your business make informed decisions, comply with your AML/CTF obligations, and contribute to the integrity of Australia's financial system. You can find detailed guidance on the AUSTRAC website. This includes comprehensive information on AML/CTF program requirements, customer due diligence, personnel due diligence and training, and reporting to AUSTRAC. The material we've discussed is based on AUSTRAC's customer due diligence reform guidance. We expect you to review this to deepen your understanding of your AML/CTF obligations and explore how they apply to your business. A good place to start after reviewing the guidance is to begin drafting or reviewing and updating the CDD policies in your AML/CTF program. Remember, your AML/CTF policies must explain how your business conducts ongoing customer due diligence, monitors customers, responds to unusual activity, and reassess customer risk when necessary. A reminder, if you outsource the creation of your AML/CTF program or any AML/CTF functions, you remain responsible for meeting your obligations under the AML/CTF Act and rules. Once your AML/CTF policies are in place, you must make sure your staff understand them. This includes training personnel on how to identify unusual behavior and transactions, escalate matters when necessary, and take appropriate action to manage and mitigate MLTF risk. This now brings the video to an end. As we mentioned at the start of this recording, we recommend that you consider the video's content alongside the detailed guidance available on the AUSTRAC website. The AUSTRAC YouTube channel has other videos available, including the other videos in the CDD series. If you are a new reporting entity, and if you haven't already, we recommend watching the AML/CTF Essential series. This is a series of 4 webinars designed to introduce you to AUSTRAC, Australia's AML/CTF regime, and provide the information you need to help meet your new obligations. For further education products, please visit the AUSTRAC website. Thank you for viewing the ongoing customer due diligence video.